Hello and welcome back to Chapter 20. I just want to say this is the first recording that I'm making where I actually know my students. So welcome back everybody. I'm glad that I've gotten to know you, and hopefully these lectures that are now going to be produced will be a little bit more animated. I kind of know your personality, so maybe I can use that in these lectures. We're in the last chapter of the cardiovascular system, which is all about the blood vessels, so the roadways of the body where blood can flow through. There are three types of vessels, and I actually am not even in the PowerPoint, am I? There are three types of vessels that we'll talk about in this chapter. We'll talk about arteries, then we'll talk about capillaries, then we'll talk about veins. Arteries are your thickest and most muscular of all of the blood vessels, and they always carry blood away from the heart. Capillaries are the thinnest. They typically are only one layer of epithelium with a connective tissue basement membrane, and their function is to provide nutrient exchange or gas exchange. And then the veins are the blood vessels that bring nutrient poor, oxygen poor blood back to the heart. There are three basic tunics that your blood vessels have, depending on the type of blood vessel, the thickness of the tunic, and the number of tunics is going to vary slightly. The tunics surround a region called the lumen. That's the space inside where the blood actually flows through. The three layers, internally to externally, are the tunica intima, which is epithelial tissue, simple squamous epithelium, with a basement membrane of areolar connective tissue. Then we have the tunica media, which is nice, thick, smooth muscle that helps in movement of the blood. And then we have the tunica externa, which also is composed of epithelial tissue and connective tissue. Some of our arteries and veins are going to have their own blood vessel supply. So they are blood vessels, but they have to have a blood vessel supply to feed the muscles. So here is an artery. You can see the artery on both sides. And this is a vein. Veins tend to be more collapsible because they don't have that smooth muscle structure. And so the blue is actually showing the different tunics. So in the artery, there's your tunica intima, very thin layer. There's your tunica intima. And I already mentioned what it was composed of. The tunica media is very thick in your artery. So if you're like measuring, this looks about the same thickness as this. But if you're looking at the entire blood vessel, this is almost the majority of the blood vessel is tunica media for the artery. It is not the same for the vein. And that this is what controls or helps in movement of blood through blood vessels, but it also controls how open or closed the lumen is. So the blood vessels can constrict and make the lumen very small. There we go. Or they can dilate and the lumen can get very large. Larger lumens, more blood flow. Smaller lumens, less blood flow. And then the tunica externa is the outermost region, and this is composed of a squamous layer of epithelium, and then it has connective tissue. The connective tissue is going to be areolar connective tissue. Areolar connective tissue always makes up the basement membranes for epithelium. And the outer layer is going to have a lot of collagen as well as elastic fibers. These will allow the blood vessels to be more able to stretch and relax, okay? And I told you that some of the larger blood vessels have their own blood supply. This is known as the vasa vasorum. So here you can see the three layers. There's the externa, media, and intima. And again, the externa, this is the thickest layer on veins. The media is super thin. You can see it there and there. And then the intima. And then your capillaries tend to just have that tunica intima. So it's got that simple squamous epithelium with the areolar connective tissue basement membrane. Veins and arteries tend to run together. So when I say run together, I mean run together. So you're going to have a vein and an artery, and they go to the same areas. The vein is actually running in the opposite direction because it's bringing blood back. Artery is going in another direction, bringing blood to different areas, okay? And so blood leaves the heart through these arteries, and the arteries are going to take blood to different areas of the body. We have three types of arteries that we talk about. There's the largest of the arteries are called the elastic arteries. Then we have the conducting arteries, which are your muscular arteries, distributing arteries are your muscular arteries. And then we have the arterioles. They're the smallest of all of your arteries that bring you to the capillaries. Associated with the elastic arteries are your large veins. Associated with your muscular arteries are your medium and small veins. And then with the arterioles, we have small venules. Then the capillaries are what meet everything in the middle. I just said all of this, so I'm going to skip through this slide, and we'll go right here. Elastic arteries are also known as conducting arteries. They conduct blood to different regions of the body. Muscular arteries tend to be named for the region of the body that they are distributing blood to. And so they're known as the distributing arteries, and they're going to take blood to regions of the body, and they're usually named for those same regions. So like we have an axillary artery that's going to be running right here. There's your axillary region. We have a brachial artery that runs here. We have a radial artery. Oh, you can't see that. I'm sorry. There we go. A radial artery and an ulnar artery. So they're named for the regions of the body. And also, the muscular arteries and the small and medium-sized veins typically have the same name. So it's really nice. Once you learn the arteries, you can kind of get an idea of what the veins called. And then the smallest of our arteries are the tiny little baby arterioles. And these are what bring blood to the actual capillaries. An aneurysm is a break in the wall of the blood vessel or the artery. So blood leaks into the layer between the endothelium and the tunica externa. Okay, so the endothelium, the innermost layer, and then the tunica externa. And when blood pools there, you're constantly having some blood loss going into this little pool. And eventually that pool can put pressure on the blood vessel, causing the blockage, which can cause problems. But even worse, if that pool gets too big, it can actually cause the entire blood vessel to rupture. And that's when you're at risk for death. So if you have an aneurysm, you need to have it fixed immediately because you could actually die very quickly. So there's an aortic aneurysm right there. Capillaries then are your smallest little blood vessels. These connect arteries and veins, but they connect the smallest of the arteries, the arterioles, and the smallest of the veins, the venules. They are small enough to where only one single blood cell can move through. And this is a really, really cool thing one of my students made for me. So you can see most arteries and veins can fit lots and lots of blood cells, and so these are blood cells. There's actually two types of blood cells here, if you're paying attention. This is a, right there, a sickle-shaped cell, and this is a regular blood cell. So I had a group that did sickle cell anemia as their topic, and they made this, and I get to keep it. So blood cells individually can go through capillaries one at a time. There are three types of capillaries. The most common is the continuous capillary, and these have a lot of tiny pores that allow for nutrients to move through. We have fenestrated capillaries, which have larger pores, allowed for larger molecules to get through, but still not like proteins, not monster proteins. We see fenestrated capillaries in our small intestines, where we have a lot of filtration and reabsorption of nutrients, and in our kidneys. And then we have sinusoids. Sinusoids are the largest of all of our capillaries. We see these in our liver, where we are producing proteins that have to move into the blood. So these proteins can move directly through the sinusoids into the blood. And nutrients from the intestines can move to the liver and be transferred. Here's just a picture of each of the different capillaries. Continuous capillaries are the most common of our blood capillaries, and again, they have very small pores that allow for nutrient exchange, but they have the least amount of nutrient exchange occurring in them. Here's fenestrated capillaries. These are the ones that allow for a lot of nutrient exchange, rapid reabsorption, filtration. And then the sinusoids, these are the largest of our capillaries, and they allow for very large molecules like proteins to actually move through. They're also thought of as discontinuous capillaries. Blood moves through our body. You know, all of our blood moves through our body every single minute. And because of this, we're always having blood moving through different regions, but we have so much road work in our body that blood can't perfuse every single tissue. So most of our capillary beds are going to be closed off at any given time. Only a small percentage of capillary beds, about 5%, are perfused at any given time. The rest are closed off. And so when capillaries are closed, there's this thoroughfare channel that allows blood to move directly from the arteriole directly to the venule. And so blood bypasses the capillary bed. And these tiny little smooth muscle sphincters, they're called precapillary sphincters, are going to constrict, allowing the blood to move directly through. When the capillary bed is open then, the sphincters are going to be relaxed and blood can flow through the capillaries and you can have nutrient exchange. Capillary bed's closed, blood flows right through. Make sense? So this is when you're exercising. Blood doesn't need to get to certain regions of the body as immediately as it would to get to the muscles. Our muscles need the blood so we get all the nutrients to the muscles that are helping us to run or lift weights, whatever we're doing. But then when we relax, though the capillaries beds that were closed off, like to say the kidneys, because we're not worrying about filtering the blood into the kidneys, are going to open back up and blood can go back to the kidneys, go back to the small intestine, stuff like that. Think about stress versus relaxation. Okay. I'm going to stop here on this video because I'm at 14:22, and we'll pick this back up on our next video.